So good afternoon again. First of all, I'm very happy that you added some time to me because it says until 4, but I can see that in INSS it's only 22, so no, 23. So we do have time. We have time here. Um, Someone invite a man of my age who started to work in the Iranian studies in Tel Aviv University in 68 before many of you were even born. So you're obviously taking a certain risk here, so I might definitely slid back into my senile memories, and there are signs of that, definitely. But anything reminds me of something else, and I actually put aside here various pointers I wrote down because some of you already addressed those matters, and I will try to maybe rephrase things. The name of this conference was something that I really liked. So it's the first international conference that I had in Tel Aviv University in the 80s. That was the name of it. But then it was Iran, which was part of the New World Order. Iran was the New World Order. And our conclusion was, and the article I wrote, and in the book I edited on this topic, that it became from a vision of New World Order. It became, in fact, Khomeinism in one country, not communism in one country, but Khomeinism in one country. So the approach really changed because the export of the revolution, the beginning of the revolution, that was the intent. Here we are in, and all the Arabics and Muslim countries will fall apart. Will fall apart as the cards tower, and they all join Islamic revolution, but it didn't happen. Again, it didn't happen, but in Iran there is a certain logic in this strategy. They never give up when something gets stuck in the wall, even if it's an arms deal with Israel. That Khomeini said, you know what? If you actually are thinking, you can actually grab to the tail of the snake, and we have the snake, by the way, and a dog in another context, but it's in the United States context, in fact. Again, when we talk about Iran, and I'm very happy to see something else here, that you started to take very seriously Iranian history. Because history is not just unified matter. It depends how you decipher it, how you look at it. Very often, as historians, we love this statement addressed to Churchill, that if you want to actually see into the future, look back into the past. Churchill never said that, by the way, and I looked into it. But the different demagogues that really want to consider themselves Churchill, they do use Churchill as something they rely upon. It's a really high tree to bark on. But when you look into the future, in fact, or into the past, it's easier for you maybe to see the future, but it will never solve the problems. Otherwise, we'll all be known to predict the future because it's hard to even predict the history. In fact, our vision of history is changing all the time as well. So Iran is a country with strategy. Different from Israel, I would like to highlight that, as Tamir Pardo said 12 years ago, that Israel has only tactics and zero strategy. It was 12 years ago. And he meant someone particular. I am not talking about Israelis, I'm talking about Iranians. Iran has strategy. It's a country with strategy. It's a country that invented backgammon and chess. But they preferred backgammon as a game to adopt. And they're also well known as someone who actually prepare carpets. You know how long does it take to actually to build a carpet? And each point has to be at the right place. There's a patience of endless nature that you need to have in order to actually entwine weave those rugs and those carpets. Our perception of Iran, we're a tiny country, and we call Iran as periphery. It's ridiculous. This is from the days of Ben Gurion. The alliance of countries of periphery. What kind of logic is here? How can we perceive Iran as a peripheral country with such an ancient civilization that fulfills such an important role in the history of the human race? We are not the center of the world from our perspective. This is something common for us and Iranians. Two old nations, ancient civilizations of the past. New regimes, though, as the State of Israel, Iranians as the Islamic Republic. Countries that went through trauma in the 20th century. I'm not comparing our trauma to their trauma, of course, in the Iran-Iraq war. But when Iranians talk about never again, they do adopt it from Israeli culture in a sense. So the drama of a country that almost collapsed because of war. So if you look at the historical perspective of vision, we do have a historical vision that is quite common for both nations, but there are also differences. Two of those countries see themselves at the center of the universe. Iran perceives itself, again, and Graham Fuller wrote a book about it, the center of universe. And they are center of universe as far as they perceive themselves, and as a part of their self-perception. And how difficult to understand Iran is because Iran is actually the plethora of so many different components. It's an actual mosaic of so many particles. The history of 2,600 years at least. It depends how you count it. After all of those thousands of years, there were pivotal changes. Iran is an empire that was born as an empire, and they say that openly Iran was born as an empire and it should think globally, really. The global way of thinking is nothing new. It's not a result of the revolution. Iran knocked on the doors of the Mediterranean twice in its history. It's not the first time when they appear in the Mediterranean basin of what is called today Lebanon. This country has history of spread. They were a large empire that ruled significant part of the world, of then well-known universe, again, of what used to be the civilization and universe then. So when it comes to a reality of imperial thinking that was connected to the Paleolithic thinking, they perceive themselves as something that fulfill an important role in history, literature, poetry, of humanity, geometrics, and other fields. And afterwards, the Islamic Empire rose to its glory. It was, although Iran was conquered by Islam and it adopted Islam as a religion, but not as a language and a culture and heritage. So when it comes to Iran, Islamic history as well position themselves in a very dignified place. They constantly talk about that. I talked about it recently. Iran is al-Qura. It's the actually forepost of Islam. This is the name that is preserved for Mecca, al-Qura. In an article written by an intellectual from Syria in 1902, he addressed the Arabic and Muslim world that needs to unite against the forces from outside, the Ottoman Empire, the Europeans, and etc., while uniting after Mecca. And today Iran says, in fact, that Tehran is the new Mecca. And from this perspective, what does it actually mean being al-Qura? The country that is worthy of this name of mother of all the al-Qura is the mother of civilizations, of tombs, right? So the areas. It's not Haifa and the surroundings. It's actually the mother of all different foreposts. So the mother of all foreposts. So if the mother of all foreposts will be in the risk of extinction, all the Muslims must come and help it to continue its existence. So the Saudis will be coming actually, which is the original al-Qura. But we at this particular status, as an Islamic regime, you all must pledge allegiance to us. Obviously, the Saudis and Egyptians feel differently about that approach. But when it comes to the Islam, they perceive themselves as an important part of their civilization, and not just the country that is basking in its glorified past. We do that as well. But they're also the eternal victim. There's constantly this victimization of themselves. This is very Shia approach, not the Yemenites, by the way. The biggest surprise of mine in this war of October wasn't Iran or Hamas. That was actually, in fact, the Yemeni Houthi play in this sense. Country, the backyard, almost down under, but this is more Australians, right? So the Yemen was always the backyard, that suddenly they developed technologies, those technologies that I was stunned, really. I was not aware of what has happened. By the way, a significant part of the problems of Iran is working with the proxies. I didn't know actually how to translate the word proxy. Someone gave me an idea of actually saying that in Hebrew. They're represented by power, Bildiaba, the forces that are on behalf of someone. In Persian and in Arabic, there's a term that says someone who is working on your behalf. So he is your representative of force. But can you say that in Hebrew? Not necessarily, right? You would say proxy or proxy. We actually say another term in Hebrew that's, yeah, we're looking for new terms all the time. We never adapt anything from others, right? So you know what, we don't have much time, so we'll not spend it on linguistic discussions. Let's move forward. We all have our own associations with those words, I guess, right? So Iran has one significant advantage when it comes to, I'm sorry, using the term proxy in Hebrew is also possible. Proxies challenge Iran, in fact, though they've been very effective. But when a Yemenite leader reprimands Ayatollah Khomeini that you're sending our children to fight and you are being quiet in the very biblical terms, you do absolutely nothing. So do something or just sit quietly and don't give us advices. So when I talk about proxy, there are different types of proxies, and not all equal, obviously. There are proxies that are part of an existing state. And whether they want to not, they do need to take into account, even a little bit, the interests of the country in which they are currently present. And I think this is also Hezbollah is heroic, and they perceive themselves. They're part of a state. And Iraqis as well, the Iraqi proxy of Iran as well. Therefore, they conduct, only Houthis have absolutely no God. They might have God, but they're Zaidi Shia. They're not Ashari Shia. They represent different factions. They don't need Iran to teach them to hate Israel. Hating Israel of the Houthis prior to the Islamic regime and prior to any other, the passion to fight exists. They have strategic reasons actually to fight as well, but against us. I remember that when I used it to give a talk in Iran, I gave a term as proverb in Persian in the Farsi, but then the head of the research center in Air Force was quite embarrassed because I gave an example from the Navy. In Farsi, they say that the actually ship that is a ship in a turbulent water stands, the fate is being decided by the waves. And Iran will never stop smoothing. You close the door, they open the window. Differently from Israel, that thinks that if they will not address the problem will be solved somehow on its own behalf. But the Iranian vessel constantly moving, they're really good to actually fishing in murky waters. Look at their proxies, those countries that join Iran. Who are those countries? None of those countries didn't join because of the tremendous success of the Islamic Revolution in solving problems of the Iranian society. Not even one Arabic country, in fact, didn't join the camp. Where did they succeed? They succeeded in places where the local regimes collapsed. Look at Lebanon in 1982, in fact. Look at Iraq or, for example, Syria. That is not necessarily a type of proxy, but as well there is a collapse of the centralized regime of the internal forces and systems. Houthis in the civil war. And this is where exactly the tremendous Iranian success lays. And I want to get to the point that is important for the Iranians. We talked a lot here about China and Russia. I will not get into it, obviously, because I studied some of those topics, but I learned a lot here as well. But in the eyes of the Iranians, in fact, there is no substitute to the American, in the Iranian public. There is no replacement to the American. When they talk about superpower, this is America. It's not China or Russia. There's no alternative to the Americans. This beautiful sleeping beauty of Russia, in fact, is indeed became one of the two devils, in fact, because they managed to bring themselves to the position where the relations with Iran are good. To what extent they're good? There are also reservations in those relations. In 2014 when Iran allowed the Russian aircrafts to land in the airfield in Hamadan, which is the birthplace of Litvak. Litvak is also a Persian name, by the way. Mayor Litvak from Hamadan. And within 2 days, they closed the airfield because the Iranian parliament was actually on the brink of the uprisal. So there is a certain limit. And when you talk about Turkmenchai, this is clear, really, until today, when someone wants to say that he's been screwed over or forced into humiliating situation, they forced upon me Turkmenchan conditions. 1828, look at that, and 2024, and it's still etched in the consciousness of the Iranian people. When you look at China, by the way, I never heard the guards of the revolution expressing they were very much involved in the creating tight connections with China, but I never heard the open expressions on this account. Again, but the main matters was said here and touched upon again. And my last sentence, I would like to address the Islamic revolution was not designated in order to rule the world, in order to solve the problems of the universe. The purpose of the Islamic revolution was to solve the distress of the Iranian people, the way they experienced from the evil Islamic revolution. I repeated it so many times. I lived in Iran for 2 years, actually, almost before the Shah regime fell. I was in Tehran University. People that sat near me in the room were the most liberal part of those that actually plotted this revolution that built the connections with other countries. 45 years later, which of the problems of Iran this regime managed to solve? I'm always trying to summarize the goals of Iran: bread and liberty, social justice, and political justice. There's no more liberty in Iran. There's no more liberty than it used to be during the Shah regime. And Shah was not a Democrat, trust me. I heard that in a different lecture, like yesterday, somewhere else. So there is no prosperity, there is no welfare, and children of the parents of today, it's difficult for them to provide for their family as difficult as it was before the revolution. So those are the problems, and one of the matters that are connected to the events of today, how come Pezeshkian was elected? I ask myself that, really. First of all, we know that in Iran there are surprises, actually. There are surprises, in fact. They do approve someone, and it's a third president was elected that the regime didn't want, by the way, and they approved them to run for the elections was Khatami, Rouhani, and now this one. So Hamidi wanted someone such as Raisi. And what is someone like Raisi? Someone who is a yes man, someone who will do everything that the spiritual leader would ask him to do, who will actually pave the path of the revolution to the further stages, and will amplify the revolution and will perpetuate this revolution. But something got wrong. And if Khamenei wanted to prevent of Pezeshkian to be elected, it was a piece of cake, really, not a problem for them. But I ask myself, how come they allowed it? Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they prevent his election? And one of the thoughts I have on that behalf, that they reached the stage where Khamenei preferred the stability of the regime and not the heritage and the legacy. Because they knew if they will now get involved and intervene in the election, the stability of the government can be undermined, because the Iranian people, the Shia, they're also people that take the streets and protest and rally. This is one of the only countries in the world where they have two significant revolutions in the 20th century, and different events that happened during the last years and decades. There are definite limits to what extent you can actually push further your public and more pragmatic, more weakened, until an Iranian intellectual that actually speaks really nicely of Israel, even now during the war, he said that I support the Israeli standing on war with Hamas. One of the intellectuals in Iran, Tival Kalam, he says that openly. He's also one who refused to step on the Israeli banner, and he was photographed. It went viral, his refusal, and there are things like that in Iran. And in Iran, they are indeed, not everything that you see is actually what is happening. You need, maybe I'll summarize that with an example that from time to time I give. You probably heard that from me, so I apologize in advance. Those of you, when you want to show the strangeness of Iran, the strangeness of Iranian policy from one hand, that they have this volatile pendulum movement. You can see one thing, but the results will be very different. The former Persian person who came back to Iran asked his friend, listen, where can I buy here cigarettes? They're very heavy smokers in Iran, so if you want to buy cigarettes, let's go to the mosque. Well, the mosque became a place of business. In fact, it said, we're going to the mosque. It's not a place to actually argue about prices. The mosque is a holy place of, prayer and worship. He said, you want a place to pray? Let's go to University of Tehran, where they have a Friday prayers every week now as well. It said, but university is not a place to pray. It's a place of intellectual research. And why? Oh, you want intellectual? Let's go to the prison where all the intellectuals are. Let's go to prison. I'll take you there. But prison is not a place for intellectuals. It's a place for all the criminals where they need to be, and thieves, and you know where they go. Obviously, you can guess, right? Let's go to the government. Government is the place for the thieves and the criminals. It's a place to politicians and leaders and the statesmen. Okay, then let's go to the mosque, okay? So there's a little bit of an integration of different aspects of Iranian reality. It's an Islamic interpretation. What is an Islamic interpretation? Who interprets Islam? There is no interpretation of Islam. It's a different faith, but one of the leading intellectuals of Iran, there is no one interpretation of Islam, no final interpretation, and it cannot be an official interpretation of Islam. In one word, about this urge of protest in Iranian psyche, when the Iranian Revolution began, the slogan was, Islam is the solution. And during the long run until 2009, they started to ask whether it is the solution. And during the last protest and demonstration in 2010, 2021 as well, they said that Islam is not the solution. And this is the past of the protest I was in 2000, when the Ukrainian, I live in the former past century, in 2000, the Ukrainian plane that was shot down when the students took the streets of protest, and the government in the end admitted that they shot down the Ukrainian plane, and they said it was a human error. The slogans of the youth at the streets of Tehran was our error, human error is the Islamic revolution. And this is the biggest problem of the regime today. Thank you.